She watched her mother-in-law lift the first gift from the baby shower table and drop it into a black trash bag. Then the next, and the next. Pink blankets, tiny dresses. "Useless," she sneered. "This family needs a boy." Her husband stayed silent, but the 8-month pregnant woman they were humiliating had just closed the biggest real estate deal in the country. The hall smelled like gardenias and warm candle wax. White flowers lined every table. Pink balloons floated near the ceiling, tied with ribbons that swayed gently every time someone walked through the door. 20 women had come to celebrate. They wore their good dresses and brought wrapped gifts and talked to each other in that soft, careful way people do when they're trying to make something feel special. Amara sat at the center of it all, like she always sat, quietly, gracefully, with both hands resting on the round curve of her belly. She was 8 months along. Her white dress was simple and clean. Her earrings caught the light when she turned her head. She was smiling because she had decided to smile, because she had decided that this afternoon was going to be beautiful no matter what. She had been deciding things like that for a long time. The gifts were stacked on a long table to her left. Her church sisters had brought blankets, soft pink ones with little embroidered flowers at the edges. Her co-worker had brought a set of tiny dresses in pale yellow and cream. And then there was the quilt, wrapped carefully in brown paper and tied with twine, sent all the way from Georgia by Amara's mother. Her mother couldn't afford the trip, but she had sewn every square of that quilt herself, and she had written a note inside that Amara hadn't opened yet because she was saving it for a quiet moment. Then Gloria stood up. Gloria was Musa's mother, a tall woman with sharp eyes and the kind of posture that told you she had spent her whole life expecting rooms to move out of her way. She wore a cream blazer and a gold brooch near her collar, and she moved to the gift table the way a judge moves to a bench, like the decision was already made before she got there. She lifted the first gift without looking at the tag. It was one of the pink blankets. She held it for one brief second, her lips pressed together, and then she dropped it into the black trash bag she had brought from the kitchen. The room went still. She reached for the next one, a pair of tiny white socks with lace trim. Into the bag. Then the yellow dresses, then the cream onesies, then a small stuffed bear with a pink ribbon around its neck. One after another, Gloria worked through the table with the efficiency of a woman doing a chore she had already rehearsed in her mind. "This family needs a boy," she said, not to anyone in particular. She said it the way you say the sky is blue, like it was a fact that required no discussion and deserved no argument. A girl cannot carry the Okafor name forward. These things are useless, all of this pink useless. Nobody in the room said a word. 20 women sat with their hands in their laps, and their eyes somewhere between the floor and the table, and the space just past Amara's left shoulder. Not one of them spoke, not one of them stood up. They sat in the particular silence of people who know something is wrong, but have decided that it is not their wrong to correct. Musa stood near the door with his arms folded and his jaw set. He was wearing a dark shirt and slacks, dressed like a man who had come to endure an afternoon rather than enjoy one. He didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at Amara. He looked at something near the window, something that wasn't there, and he said nothing. He said nothing. And then from the corner of the room, where she had positioned herself at the edge of a chair, like someone who had been invited but was still deciding whether to stay, Diana laughed. It was a short sound, soft and pointed at the same time, like a pin dropping on marble. She was Gloria's closest friend, and she had been appearing in Amara's life with increasing frequency over the past several months. At dinners, at family gatherings, always near Musa, always with that same small smile. "Some women," Diana said, smoothing the front of her dress, just aren't built for this family. No one responded to that either. Amara looked at Diana for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked at Musa. Then she looked at her hands, folded over her belly, and she took one long, quiet breath. She did not cry. She did not stand up. She did not say the things that were rising in her chest with the pressure of water behind a dam. She had too much dignity for the room she was sitting in, and she knew it, and that knowing was the only thing keeping her upright. Near the bottom of the gift pile, almost buried under the other things Gloria had not yet reached, was something small and wrapped in a piece of cloth rather than paper. Amara had brought it herself that morning from the top drawer of her nightstand. It was a gold bracelet, thin and simple and warm to the touch. Her grandmother had pressed it into her palm years ago on a Georgia porch on a summer afternoon, and Amara had never let it leave her wrist until just recently, when her belly had grown too round for it to sit comfortably. She had wrapped it herself and placed it with the other gifts because she wanted to pass it to her daughter the right way, formally, at a celebration, the way her grandmother had passed it to her. Gloria's hand closed around it without looking. It went into the bag with everything else. Amara watched it disappear. On the table beside her, face down, her phone buzzed once. A notification pulsed silently against the white tablecloth. She didn't reach for it. She already knew what it said. She had been waiting for that message since early that morning, and now that it had come, she felt something settle in her chest, something very quiet and very certain, like the last piece of a structure locking into place. She picked up her glass of water and took a small sip. She smiled at the woman across from her who hadn't done anything wrong. And she stayed. 10 years before the baby shower, a small wooden porch in a town outside Atlanta, Georgia. Summer. The air smelled like cut grass and heat, and the sky was that particular shade of orange that only happens just before the sun gives up for the day. Amara was 17, sitting on the top porch step with her knees pulled up and her chin resting on her arms. Beside her, in the old rocking chair that had been on that porch since before Amara was born, sat her grandmother, Nana Roo, a small woman with silver hair and hands that had worked their whole lives and showed it. Hands that had cleaned other people's houses and sewn her own family's clothes and folded themselves in prayer every single morning since she was a girl. Nana Roo was holding a gold bracelet between 2 fingers, simple, thin, the kind of thing that didn't announce itself. She took Amara's hand without asking, the way grandmothers do, and pressed the bracelet into her palm and closed Amara's fingers around it. "This doesn't leave your wrist," Nana Roo said, "until you've built something that can't be taken from you." Her voice was quiet, but it had weight to it. The kind of weight that comes from having lived long enough to mean everything you say. Not love, not a man, not somebody's approval, something yours, baby. You hear me? Amara nodded, the way 17-year-olds nod when they are listening but don't fully understand yet. She put the bracelet on. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for that exact wrist. She held her arm up and watched it catch the evening light. She kept it on for the next 11 years without ever taking it off. In those 11 years, Amara became a woman that her neighborhood hadn't quite expected, not because she did anything dramatic, but because she was the kind of quiet that builds while everyone else is busy making noise. She earned a full academic scholarship, the first from her high school in 6 years. She packed 2 suitcases and took a bus to a university 400 miles north of that Georgia porch. She studied architecture and urban development, and she sat in the front row of every class, not because she was performing anything, but because she genuinely needed to hear every word. She worked. She worked the way people work when they know that no one is coming to make it easier, when they understand that the space between where they are and where they are going is filled entirely by the hours they are willing to put in. She waited tables on weekends. She tutored other students on weeknights. She sent money home when she could. She graduated at the top of her class without making a speech about it. Her parents, her father who laid hardwood floors for 22 years, and her mother who cleaned offices in the early mornings before the workday started, drove up for her graduation in a car that needed the oil changed, and wore their best clothes and cried like they had just watched something be completed, something they had started, something that had taken everything they had. Amara stood between them in her cap and gown, and she held both their hands and understood for the first time what Nana Roo had meant, what it meant to build something that couldn't be taken. There was also the trust. Nana Roo had died quietly in her sleep the winter of Amara's junior year, and she had left behind something no one in the family had fully understood the weight of: a small parcel of land that had been sitting untouched in the Georgia countryside for 40 years, purchased slowly and carefully by a woman who cleaned houses and believed in property the way some people believe in God. The land had been in a trust. Amara's name was the one inside it. She didn't touch it immediately. She spent 3 years after graduation building her career, learning the industry, studying what the land could become. Then, carefully and without announcing herself, she began, parcel by parcel, acquisition by acquisition, a portfolio that grew the way Nana Roo had taught her. Everything grew, quietly, consistently, one steady layer at a time. She never told Musa. She wanted to say that she had her reasons, and she did. She had the kind of reason that is hard to explain to someone who has never been loved for the wrong things. She had watched men change when they learned what a woman had, watched them shift, watched something move behind their eyes, some quiet calculation that changed the temperature of everything that came after. She had seen it happen to women she knew. Women who had been loved softly until the number came out, and then found themselves being managed instead of cherished. She loved Musa in those early years. She loved him genuinely and with her whole heart. He was charming, and he made her laugh, and he looked at her like she was the most interesting person in any room. She wanted that look to be about her, just her, not what she owned, not what she was worth on paper. So she kept the portfolio in her name and her name alone. She managed it the way she managed everything, carefully, brilliantly, from a place of deep quiet. And she loved her husband. She just loved herself more carefully. The ride home from the baby shower was 22 minutes long, Amara counted. She sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded over her belly and watched the city move past the window. Musa drove with one hand on the wheel and his elbow resting on the door. The radio was on. Some sports station, men talking about a game. Neither of them turned it off. Neither of them spoke. She waited. She was good at waiting. He pulled into the garage and cut the engine and sat there for a moment, with his hands still on the wheel. She thought maybe he was going to say something. She gave him the space to say it. She sat and she waited, and she gave him every opportunity to be the man she had married. He got out of the car and went inside and poured himself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen counter looking at his phone. That was the night Amara understood that the silence was not temporary. The weeks that followed were slow and heavy in the way that only a particular kind of heartbreak can make time feel. Musa came home late 3 nights that week. He said it was work. He said the Henderson account was complicated. He said his boss was breathing down his neck. He said all the things a man says when the truth is something else entirely. The receipt was in his jacket pocket, folded in half. A dinner for 2 at a restaurant on the west side of the city that Amara knew by name but had never been to. A steak place, the kind where they brought bread in a basket and the candles were real, and the bill came in a leather folder. She held it in her hand for a long moment and then set it back exactly where she had found it, not because she was going to pretend she hadn't seen it, but because she wasn't ready to use it yet. Gloria called every morning, sometimes twice. The calls were always framed as concern, maternal, gentle on the surface, with the soft texture of a woman who loved her son and wished nothing but good things for everyone. But inside the concern, if you listened carefully, were instructions. Amara had gotten very good at listening carefully. Maybe, Gloria suggested, Amara should consider a different hospital, one that Gloria's own doctor recommended, one where they know how to handle complicated situations. Maybe Amara's diet needed adjusting. Had she been walking enough? Sleeping on the right side? Maybe, and Gloria mentioned this one with particular delicacy, as though she had been building toward it for several calls. Amara should think about having a conversation with the family's attorney, just preliminary, just to make sure everyone's interests were protected. For the baby, Gloria said, everything for the baby. Amara would say, yes, I'll think about it, and then she would end the call and stand in her kitchen and breathe. Diana had become a permanent presence at Sunday dinners. She always brought something, a bottle of wine, a dessert, something that demonstrated she had taken the time. She sat across from Musa and talked to him in a way that had its own language, a language built of inside references and shared laughter, and the particular ease of two people who have been spending time together that the rest of the room doesn't know about. She was careful. She was never overtly inappropriate. She was just consistently, persistently there. One Sunday, Amara was in the kitchen finishing the rice when she heard Diana say it. She wasn't trying to be heard. Or maybe she was, in the way that some people manage to say things just loud enough to reach the exact person they want to reach. She's not what your family needs, Diana said. Her voice was low and even. You know that, Musa. Somewhere in you, you know. A pause, and then Musa's voice, quiet and flat. Yeah. One word, 4 letters. And Amara understood everything. She didn't drop the spoon. She didn't go into the dining room. She stood at the stove with her back straight and her hand steady, and she finished the rice, and she brought it to the table, and she set it down, and she sat and she ate her dinner, and she passed the bread when someone asked for it. That night she went into the nursery alone. She had painted it herself 3 months ago. A soft, warm green, the color of leaves in early spring. There was a crib against the wall with a mobile above it that she had assembled herself. There was a small bookshelf with picture books lined up in order of size. There was a rocking chair in the corner that she had reupholstered with her own hands, covering the old fabric with something soft and cream-colored, something her daughter would grow up touching. She sat in that chair in the dark. She had retrieved the gold bracelet from the trash bag the morning after the baby shower. She had gone to the bin quietly before anyone was awake, and she had found it near the top, and she had taken it back and cleaned it and set it on her nightstand. She held it now in her palm, in the dark, with both hands pressed over her belly where her daughter was turning slowly, the way babies do in the deep hours when everything is still. She cried without making noise. That was the kind of crying she had taught herself, the kind that stays inside the body, that doesn't ask anything from anyone, that finishes itself and leaves you with clear eyes and a straight back by morning. She cried, and then she stopped. She looked at the crib. She thought about her grandmother's hands. She thought about the porch in Georgia and the way the sky had looked that evening, and the weight of a bracelet being pressed into a 17-year-old girl's palm by someone who believed in her without being able to explain all the reasons why. She had built something that couldn't be taken. She just needed one more step. The next morning, Musa came downstairs with his coffee and sat across from her at the kitchen table and said, in the level voice of a man delivering a decision rather than starting a conversation, that his mother thought it would be better for everyone if Amara spent the remaining weeks of her pregnancy at her parents' house. More support. Less stress on the household. He said, less stress on the household, the way someone says it when they mean less stress on themselves. He said his mother had already spoken to the doctor. He said it like it was settled. Amara looked at him across the breakfast table. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that he shifted slightly in his seat. Then she nodded. She went upstairs. She sat at the desk in their bedroom. She opened her laptop. She scrolled to a contact she had not needed to call in 3 months, and she pressed the phone icon and she waited 2 rings. "Move forward with the acquisition," she said when her attorney answered. Her voice was calm and clean. "All of it? Full closure by Friday. I don't want to wait anymore." She closed the laptop. She looked at the bracelet on the nightstand. She put it on. The Okafor family held their annual business gala on the 3rd Saturday of every month in a ballroom on the 14th floor of the Meridian Grand Hotel, a fact that Amara had always noted with a particular private appreciation for the irony of the name. The event was a tradition that Musa's family took seriously, a gathering of business contacts and family connections and people who wanted to be seen in proximity to the Okafor name. There were speeches. There was a business segment where someone presented an update on the family's ventures. There was excellent food and a live band and a dress code that everyone followed precisely. Musa had told his family that Amara was resting at home. He said it casually to several people, the way you mention something you don't expect to be questioned. He was relaxed that evening. He stood near the bar with his jacket open and his drink in his hand, and he laughed at the right moments and shook the right hands and moved through the room like a man who had decided he was doing fine. Gloria was there in a black dress with her gold brooch, a different brooch, larger, and her head slightly elevated, surveying the room with the satisfaction of someone who had gotten what she wanted. Diana was beside her in deep green, laughing at something that hadn't quite been said yet, her hand resting occasionally on Gloria's arm in the familiar way of women who have been conspiring comfortably together. The evening moved along. The band played something smooth and low. The business segment was about to begin. A projector screen had been set up at the far end of the room, and someone was adjusting a microphone. That was when the double doors opened, not loudly. There was no dramatic push, no moment of theatrical entrance. The doors opened the way doors open when the person on the other side is not trying to impress anyone. They simply opened, and Amara walked in. She was wearing deep burgundy, a dress that moved with her, that understood the shape she was carrying, that made her pregnancy look like exactly what it was, the presence of something powerful preparing to enter the world. Her hair was pulled back simply, her shoulders were back. The gold bracelet caught the light at her wrist with a warm, quiet flash. She was not alone. Her attorney walked 1 step behind and to her left. On either side of them, 2 men in dark suits, senior partners from the firm that had handled the acquisition, moved with the particular stillness of people who did not need to announce themselves, because their presence always announced itself anyway. She walked through the ballroom the way her grandmother had moved through any room she had ever entered, without urgency, without aggression, without the need to perform anything. Just present. Fully, completely present. The room noticed. Not all at once and not for any single obvious reason. It happened the way weather changes, gradually, and then completely. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. The band continued to play, but somehow seemed quieter. People who had been holding drinks lowered them slightly. Gloria saw her first. Her face didn't fall dramatically. It tightened, the way a person's face tightens when they see something they had been certain was handled and realize it is not. Diana went still in the middle of a sentence and did not finish it. Musa turned from the bar. He looked at his wife, at her belly, at her posture, at the bracelet on her wrist, at the 2 attorneys beside her, and the drink in his hand seemed to become heavier. Amara walked to the center of the room where the microphone had been set up for the business presentation. She looked at the event host, a man she had met twice at previous gatherings. and she took the microphone from his hand with the calm confidence of someone who had been given it, though no one had offered it. "I apologize for the interruption," she said. Her voice carried easily through the room because she was not straining and she was not performing. She was simply speaking clearly, the way a woman speaks when she has been quiet for a long time and is now choosing her words. "This is a family business event, and I believe what I have to share belongs here." She nodded once to her attorney. He stepped forward, opened the leather folder he had been carrying, and laid a single document flat on the nearest table. He stepped back. "2 weeks ago," Amara said, "I finalized the acquisition of the Meridian real estate portfolio." She did not rush. She did not check anyone's face to see how they were receiving it. $55 billion. The transaction closed on a Friday morning. My attorney can confirm for anyone in this room who needs confirmation that it is now the largest single real estate transaction completed in this state's history. The room was silent in the way rooms are silent when everyone is breathing, but no one is making a sound. "The lead name on that contract," she continued, "is mine. Amara Okafor. Not because I married into this family, because my grandmother believed in me when I was 17 years old and gave me something small and told me not to put it down until I had built something that couldn't be taken." She paused, just briefly. "I built it. It took 11 years, and I did every part of it myself. Quietly. While some people in this room were forming opinions about what I was worth." She turned her eyes to Gloria, not with fire, not with bitterness, with the clear, level gaze of a woman who has moved past the place where the wound lives and arrived somewhere that feels like solid ground. "My daughter," Amara said, and her voice softened on that word in a way that made several women in the room reach for something to hold, a glass, a clutch, a husband's arm, "is a billionaire heiress. She is that before she takes her first breath, before anyone in this family has the chance to decide whether she is enough." She set the microphone down on the stand. She did not slam it. She placed it gently, with care. She lifted her wrist. The gold bracelet caught the chandelier light and sent a small, warm pulse of it across the nearest table. She looked at Musa. He was looking at her. He was looking at her the way a man looks at something he has lost and is only now understanding the full size of the loss. There was nothing in his face that she needed from him anymore. She turned and walked back toward the doors the same way she had come in, steady, unhurried. Her attorney and the 2 partners fell into step beside her. The double doors closed behind her. The room stayed quiet for a long time after that. By Sunday, the story had moved through the city the way certain stories do. Not because anyone had made a public announcement, but because there had been 80 people in that ballroom, and each of them had a phone, and each of them had gone home to someone who had asked how the evening went. By Monday morning, 3 of Musa's business contacts had left messages with his office, not to congratulate him, to ask questions, quiet, careful questions about the nature of the acquisition, about the Okafor family's actual holdings, about what exactly the family name was worth when it was measured against what Amara had built on her own. The Okafor name had always carried a certain weight in their circles, the comfortable, borrowed weight of people who had been in the right rooms for long enough that no one thought to examine the foundation too closely. But now there was a different number in the conversation, a real number, and it had Amara's name on it, not theirs. Musa's clients did not leave all at once. It was more careful than that. One redirected a contract renewal, a large one, to a development firm that had been quietly affiliated with Amara's new portfolio for the past 18 months. Another postponed a meeting that had been scheduled for 3 weeks and then never rescheduled it. A third called personally and said the right things, and then sent an email that said something different. Musa read the email standing at his desk and stood there reading it twice. Nobody said Amara's name when they did these things. They didn't have to. The number spoke for itself. Diana disappeared first. She stopped coming to Sunday dinners the week after the gala. She didn't call, and she didn't text, and she didn't send any message through Gloria. She was simply gone, the way people who were never truly there tend to leave, completely, without ceremony, with the efficiency of someone who has already started building somewhere else. Within the month, she was photographed at a fundraiser event on the arm of a man in the finance industry, laughing with the full openness of someone who had already moved every piece of herself to a new location. Musa called her twice. She didn't answer. He did not call a third time. Gloria called Amara on a Tuesday afternoon. The message she left was the longest voicemail Amara had received in years. It started with family. It moved to the baby. It touched, briefly and carefully, on the word misunderstanding, using it the way people use it, when they mean I was wrong but cannot fully say so without also having to give something up. It ended with love, with the word love deployed with a precision that suggested it had been placed there on purpose rather than felt. Amara listened to the entire message, standing at her kitchen window watching the light change on the backyard. She put her phone face down on the counter. She made herself a cup of tea. She sat down and drank it slowly. She did not call back, and she felt no guilt about that. That was the part that surprised her a little. Not the decision itself, but the absence of guilt around it. She had spent years softening her own instincts for the comfort of people who never softened theirs for her. She had edited herself in rooms where no one was editing themselves on her behalf. She had been gracious in the face of things that did not deserve grace, and she had told herself that this was strength. But there was a different kind of strength she was learning now, the kind that knows the difference between forgiveness, which was hers to give in her own time and in her own way, and access. Gloria had lost her access. That was not cruelty. That was simply a door closing on a chapter that was finished. Musa came to her door on a Thursday evening, not the door of a house they shared, because Amara had moved out of the family home quietly and with very little, taking only what was hers and leaving behind what she had never needed. She was staying in an apartment she owned on the other side of the city, a place she had purchased 4 years ago that she had always kept and maintained and never mentioned. It was not large, but it was hers, and it was quiet, and the windows faced east, so she woke up in the light every morning. He knocked once. She heard it from inside, and she stood still for a moment, with her hand on the wall and her eyes closed, and she breathed. 1 breath, 2 breaths, and then she went to the door and opened it. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been living for several weeks inside the consequences of his own choices and was beginning to understand their full dimensions. He had lost some weight. There was something in his face that had not been there before. Not quite shame, not yet. Something just before shame. The early stages of a reckoning. He looked at her belly. He looked at her wrist. He looked at her face. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was low and even, and she believed that he meant it in the way a person means something when they have run out of other options, and the truth is the only thing left. Amara looked at him for a long moment. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a chapter she has already finished reading, with the recognition of someone who remembers every word of it but is no longer inside it. "I know," she said. And she closed the door, not with anger, not with satisfaction, gently, the way you close something that is finished. The divorce papers were filed the following morning. Her attorney handled the process with the same quiet efficiency with which Amara had always preferred things handled. There were no dramatic scenes. There were no arguments in hallways. There were no negotiations over things that didn't matter. Amara was precise about what she wanted and clear about what she didn't, and the whole of it was settled faster than most people would have expected. She didn't cry during any of it. She was too busy painting the nursery ceiling. 3 months after the gala, a hospital room on the maternity floor on the east side of the city. The room was quiet and warm, and the morning light came through the window in long, pale bars that crossed the floor and the bed and made everything in the room look like it had been washed gently and set out to dry. Amara was holding her daughter for the first time. The baby was small in the way all new people are small, impossibly, startlingly small, like the universe had compressed something enormous into the smallest possible form and handed it over, and was now waiting to see what would happen next. She had a full head of dark hair. Her hands were barely larger than the first joint of Amara's thumb. Her eyes were open and dark and wide, and she was looking at Amara with the particular intensity of someone meeting, for the first time, the face they had been hearing for 9 months. Amara brought her close. She pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead and stayed there, not moving, not speaking, not thinking about contracts or courtrooms or boardrooms or any of the 1,000 things that had filled the last 9 months of her life. She was just here, in this room, with this child, with the full, unhurried weight of a love that had been building longer than any business deal and was worth more than any number she had ever signed beside. Her mother was in the corner chair, crying without trying to stop. Her hands were pressed together in front of her face, and her whole body was shaking slightly with the quiet, good kind of crying that happens when something you prayed for finally arrives. Her father was standing beside her, with his hand over his mouth. He had driven up the night before in the same car. The oil changed now, and he had sat in the hospital waiting room for 4 hours without complaint, because his daughter was on the other side of a door, and he was going to be there when it opened. Amara looked up at them and smiled. It was the first smile in months that did not require any decision. It arrived on its own, from somewhere deep and uncomplicated, from the place in her that had been there before Musa, before the portfolio, before the gala, the place that was just a girl on a Georgia porch being told she was worth something by someone who meant it. She looked back down at her daughter. She reached for the gold bracelet on the nightstand beside the bed. She held it for a moment between her fingers, feeling its weight, its warmth. She thought about the porch, about the rocking chair and the orange evening sky, and her grandmother's hands. She thought about all the years she had worn it, through dormitories and architecture school and late nights and early mornings and every quiet moment of building. She thought about the night she had retrieved it from a black trash bag and cleaned it and held it in the dark of a nursery she had built herself. She looked at her daughter's wrist. Tiny. Perfect. She fastened the bracelet around it very gently, the way you handle something that is both delicate and unbreakable. The bracelet was loose on the small wrist. It would be years before her daughter grew into it, but it sat there, gold and warm and present, as though it had always been on its way to exactly this wrist, and had simply been passing through Amara's on the way. "Not until you've built something that can't be taken from you," Amara whispered. Her voice was low enough that only her daughter could hear it, and her daughter looked at her with those wide, ancient, just-arrived eyes. "Something yours, baby, you hear me?" The morning light moved across the room in the particular way that light moves when it has nowhere to rush. Amara's mother had stopped crying. Her father had taken his hand from his mouth and was smiling now, the way men smile when they have watched their children become something they don't quite have the words for. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities do in the early morning, waking up, moving, making its ordinary noise. And in this room, in the quiet center of all of it, a woman who had been underestimated and overlooked and measured against a standard she had never agreed to be measured by, sat holding her daughter and felt, for the first time in a long time, that everything was exactly as it should be. Some people will look at a quiet woman and see nothing. They will throw away her gifts. They will make decisions about what she carries without ever asking. They will mistake her patience for weakness and her silence for surrender. They will believe that because she does not announce herself, she does not exist. And they will be wrong in the particular way that people are wrong when they have been looking at something and failing to see it. There is a kind of woman who does not fight back in the moment, not because she cannot, but because she already knows how the story ends, because she has been building toward the ending since before anyone in the room knew there was a story being written. Amara was that kind of woman. She had always been that kind of woman. She had been one since a summer evening on a Georgia porch, when someone pressed something small and gold into her hand and told her the only truth she would ever need. She was seen, she was valued, and everything they took from her came back double. If Amara's story touched something deep in you today, subscribe to this channel, because every single week we tell the stories that don't get told loudly enough. The stories of women who built in the quiet, who healed in private, who showed up transformed. Until next time, stay standing and never let anyone throw away what was made for you.